Hello and welcome to Ecom Insiders Podcast. My name is Debbie, and this event is being sponsored by SPCTEK. Today's topic is how to reduce cost of goods sold and avoid brand ransom in product sourcing. My guest today is John-Kyle J.K. Beaton, co-founder of China Product Pros. He began his entrepreneurial journey in 2007. He started sourcing from Alibaba and exploring international trade. His early exposure to global e-commerce led him to go into drop shipping and e-com in 2013. With his fluency in Chinese language and extensive professional experience in managing relationships between the Chinese and Western businesses, JK and his wife have launched their agency to champion transparency in sourcing. They've spent many years living and working in China, and JK applies this deep-seated expertise to help his clients navigate the complex sourcing landscape, ensuring that you get integrity and client-focused outcomes while balancing a fulfilling personal life as a father of three. Well, JK, thank you for joining us today. I know a lot of people have questions about sourcing.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. So, we were discussing the fact that, you know, product sourcing is difficult.
Mm,
But I want to make sure that all of our audience kind of has some of the same terminology and an understanding of what we have. So I've got a couple of questions for you. How would you
sure,
define the cost of goods sold in the context of product sourcing?
sure. So I think the simplest way to define it is the cost, the final cost, once your goods hit the destination. So if we're talking about the USA, then that would be your product cost at the factory, any tariffs, and any transportation costs to the final warehouse in the US. Depending on the accounting practice, you may also include receiving costs at a 3PL or short-term storage, but generally it's your cost, transportation, tariffs.
Okay. What negotiation strategies could be employed to help reduce this cost of goods sold in your product sourcing?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this topic, and I'll just say off the top, Debbie, that I don't think it gets enough airtime. I
Mm,
find a lot of brands, because of need, they focus a lot on marketing, and
mm,
there's many strategies through advertising and sales to increase profitability. But one place where I think we need to look more as brands is in your cost of goods, and there's absolutely a lot you can do. So one thing that easily comes to mind is you need to look at who you're working with in China and
mm,
who that is that you're sourcing. And what I mean by that is if you're a brand and you go on to a classic sourcing site such as Alibaba, the vast majority of suppliers are in fact trade companies. And so these are middlemen that will charge you a fee to then take your order and contract it out to one of the many factories that they know. And of course, right, so this causes price inflation. It has a whole cascade of other issues as well, such as product quality issues. Because what can also happen with this business relationship is on your second order, they may very well give your order to a different factory than your first order. So my place to start looking is, are you working with a factory or are you working with a trade company? And for those
wow.
of you out there, you might be wondering, like, how do I know, right? And there's different ways to look. When we look for clients, we'll do a deep dive. We'll look at business records and other Chinese source documentation to find out. But a quick way you can check at home is go take their address, go on to either Google Maps or Baidu Maps, Baidu. It's a Chinese Google-like site, and see where the location is. If it's in a commercial downtown district, chances are very high you're working with a trade company.
Mm,
If it's in an industrial district, with other factories nearby, then you're probably working with a factory.
Good pointers. I mean, really good pointers. I think people maybe do sourcing all wrong. They start with trying to find the product and then they kind of just skim over who's producing it and getting it to them and maybe not taking enough time there. Um, what do you think about diversifying, or how can diversifying that supply chain reduce some of your risks in your cost of goods sold?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I think especially as your brand matures and as your orders get larger, you don't want to have everything with a single factory because things can happen. Um, there could be another global pandemic, and maybe that factory gets hit with a lot of workers becoming sick, or they may go bankrupt for financial reasons. Or as your orders increase, they may not be able to handle the volume. And
Yeah.
then, so from a point of need, you'll be forced to look for a secondary source. But we always recommend after your second or third order, don't get too comfortable with a single factory. Start looking for other factories, and it has not just the benefit of diversifying your supply chain by having a second backup plan B, but it also helps you to leverage the pricing of the other factory against your original factory and vice versa.
Mhm.
So you will not only have uh, two different relationships. And by the way, it's not cheating. It's not like dating. In the business world, it's perfectly fine to have two factories at the same time. Um, and it's common practice in China as well. So if your factory finds out, they won't be offended. They'll probably think you're a shrewd business person.
Well, that's good to know. Um, what kind of contingency plans then do you actually put in place to avoid, say, the brand ransom incidents? I mean, do you share everything with both of them? What do you do?
Yeah. So let me break down what the brand ransom situation is first. And you probably guess by the sounds of it, it's not a fun one, and it's best to be avoided. So, what can happen in China is like any country, you have opportunists that are looking to make a quick buck. And so, if they see a brand that's doing very well, that has a high export volume, and does not have a trademark in China, what they then can do is apply for said trademark. And then at the port, with their trademark in hand, they can say to the port authorities, these are my goods, look. And the goods get snared up at port. And you can guess what happens next. You get an email into your inbox saying, hey, we have your goods stuck and pay up, or they're not going to move. So an easy way to avoid this, and I would do this in year one of having your brand. If you haven't done it already, for the price you pay, usually to get a trademark in China, it's anywhere from $500 to $1,000, and it will protect you from this brand ransom situation. So that's one thing. Get a trademark in China if you don't have one already. It'll help you sleep better at night. Um, these things don't happen too often, Debbie. But when they do happen, it's an awful situation, as you can
Yeah,
imagine, right?
yeah, I'm sure.
Um, Second thing about IP, yeah, absolutely. You want to be mindful with your factories about how much you share and who you share it with. But ultimately, to make your products, you need to share everything at one point. So the method we use and we recommend to our clients is when working with a new factory, for example, you can drip feed the information to them. So if you're going to get quotes from, let's say, 7 or 8 different factories, you probably don't want to take your highly customized product that does not exist yet out in the world and give them all of your CAD drawings. That would be a bad idea. I'm not saying every factory is going to run away with your idea, but Some factories, they might, they're looking to innovate too, right? So I would take either a like product, something that already exists on the market, and you can take the specifications of that, the dimensions, the weight, the materials, the look, and you can say, this is what we want. This is close to what we want. Can we get some initial quotes? And
Hmm.
then through that process of getting your quotes, you begin to shortlist down which factories you're interested in, and then you take it a step further. And we recommend sending something like an NNN contract. It's not enormously enforceable in China, but what it does, it sets a precedent with the factories that you're not low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So for brands that don't do this, and there's quite a few, it shows that you're not one of them. It shows that you care about your IP, and the factories is more likely to take you more seriously because of that.
Now, discuss with us maybe a specific case study where your company came in and actually successfully reduced somebody's cost of goods sold.
Sure. Yeah, one immediately comes to mind. This is one of our favorite things to do, by the way, is to take a brand, an existing brand, or a new brand, and get great pricing for them. So one thing we did, we had a brand that's 4 or 5 years old, and we looked at the first thing was who are they working with, and that's what we started the podcast with. And we saw they were working with a trade company. So by not just one trade company, 3 trade companies. So they're sourcing, they had a product line, I think of 23 different SKUs, and they were sourcing from 3 different factories or trade companies. um, and then what we did, we took those products, we consolidated them into 2 different factories. So we
Oh,
logistically tightened up their operations and we helped reduce their costs by 33%, almost
wow.
overnight. I move, and not only that, but the consistency, and that's such an important word in manufacturing,
Mm.
consistency of quality improves immensely. Um, so gone were the days of having an order that was amazing, only to unknowingly have the second or third or eighth order then given to a different factory that's not as familiar with the product. And suddenly you get product back and you're looking at it and you're like, what happened to the specs I shared with you? What happened with our plans to improve this one functionality point of the product? So that was a really fun one. And there's many other cases like that. But again, look at who you're working with. It's low hanging fruit if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're looking for a way to save cost.
What are some of the industry's best practices for just reducing some of those costs of goods in product sources? Besides looking at, I love the fact that you're talking about going to a trade person or a factory and that difference, but what are some of the other best practices that they should follow?
Yeah. So another one we like to recommend a lot is if you don't have it already, put in a return policy with your factory. And this means for any manufacturer defect returns from customers, we're not talking, I don't like the color or it didn't fit me returns, but it was broken, it broke after a week, this part came severely scratched. Any of these types of complaints you get from your customers, you can then, through a negotiated contract with your factory, get back those same units on your next purchase order with your factory. So, and it can make a considerable difference. Like for the effort that takes, that may be 2, 3, 4 emails to set that up, maybe a WeChat video call, or if you're fortunate to be in China, a single visit to ask in person. And so if we're talking that you have let's say you have a 4% return rate, of which 2% is manufactured defects, and you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on product cost, then 2% suddenly starts becoming a lot. And it's one of those set it and forget it things, Debbie. So we love this recommendation. Um, Again, low hanging fruit that you can set up. And then the other things you can look at, maybe I'll name 2. So one is packaging. So I would always come back to your packaging. And I'm sure a lot of you out there, you're probably selling in Amazon, Walmart, different platforms where the difference in a few centimeters may make a huge difference in your shipping tier. So something we love to look at is how can we reduce packaging for products to reduce the shipping tiers. And not just that, but it reduces the space in containers. So that whole uh, small decrease
Yeah.
in box size can have this cascading effect that it can be very, very positive. Um, that's one thing about packaging. The second is the type of packaging you're using. So we had a client where we walked them through from using a full color box, so a box with multiple colors, very, very nice looking box. And we walked them through a redesign of that to make a more simple but minimalistic and still very, very pleasing looking black and white box. So white box, just black print on it. And when they went out and did A/B testing with their customers, they actually preferred it. They thought it
Wow.
looked more premium, and it had the impact of saving them 20 cents on every single box. And
Wow.
they ordered tens of thousands of units every year. So you can, again, like all these little tips, if you put them into practice, they can cumulatively add up to quite a bit.
Well, and you're talking about just the cost of goods sold, but then also think about if they're using Amazon FBA, that little bit of difference in packaging again saves them
Mm,
their storage costs and their shipping costs and all of that type
yep,
of stuff. So it kind of
yep,
just cascades if you do the product sourcing right to begin with. It cascades all the way through the whole process of e-commerce and stuff. Um, what would you say is a common red flag to look out for if you're trying to find the product source yourself?
sure. Common one is how long the factory has been in business. Um, Oftentimes, newer factories will try to give very attractive pricing because they know you might see that they've already been around for 2 years. And so they may give a generous discount to get you in the door. But then you may very well become their guinea pig. So, they may be getting a handful of new clients for different product areas. So you have to be careful of that. You have to be careful of the age of the factory. At minimum, we normally recommend 5 years,
Okay.
ideally 10 years and more for factories. So that's one red flag. A second red flag is communication. So pricing can be great, quality can be good, but if you have bad communication, it will make your life a nightmare, right? So if you're chasing them for everything and it also impacts your confidence in them. So and if you have that, like if you're listening to this and you have communication issues, you can bring it up with your factory. I actually recommend on a regular basis to speak with the higher ups in the factory, if not the owners of the factory, depending on the size of the operation. And if it's really bad, you can request for a different sales rep because sometimes it's just an issue with the sales rep, and you get to a different sales rep, and it can be wonderful. Um,
Yeah.
and also English language ability. And now because of AI, it gets even trickier because it can be
Wow.
clouded, right? So they could be taking your English message that is going deep into the specifications of your product, putting it through an AI translator. But what happens is that, the whole saying lost in translation is definitely true with AI as well. So some key details may not be understood in the way they should. So uh, provide lots of visuals if you can, and get them on a call to gauge their spoken English. You can spoof writing in any language now through AI, but it's still difficult in a live call to spoof speaking ability.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out. I have a lot of people who tell me that communication is what they find to be the most important in their source as well. And it's
Mm,
not only just can they speak the language well, but how long does it take them to get back to you? I
yeah,
mean, do they answer every email or every third email?
Right.
So I think that that is a really good thing to look at and stuff like that. Um, what would you say you use as your evaluation to find the preferred suppliers?
Yeah. So we look at a mix of different things. So communication again is tops. How cooperative they are. So if you want to make multiple changes to a product to make it your own, you need a factory that's willing to work with you and willing to do all the back and forth through ideation and prototyping to make that work. Of course, cost is a big one. You want to make sure you have a competitive cost. One thing that we're especially good at is that we know the bill of materials for most products out there. So if you come to us and you say, we want to make these glasses and we want to get a set of 6, and you're getting a certain quoted cost, we have a pretty good idea of what that cost should be. And then in addition to that, we look at business records. We want to make sure we're working with a direct factory. We look at how long they have been in business. We look at experience, so who they export to. There's another fun trick, Import Yeti. It's a free service. There's other paid ones. Panjiva is another one that comes to mind. And you can do 2 things. So you can look at your competitors. You can put in their brand names and see who their factories are. But you can also do the opposite of that. You can put in a factory name and you can see who they're exporting to as well. So that can give you an idea. I mean, you can ask the factory, Deb, you can say, hey, who do you export to? They may not be fully truthful depending on who you're
Right.
dealing with. Export records are generally fairly accurate. There's some ways of, the bigger corporations will have multiple different entities. And like if you were to type in like Lululemon, have fun. You would never find their suppliers. They're hidden very, very well. But some of
Yeah.
the smaller brands, you can pick them up fairly easily.
Now, so let's say that you have used some methods, you found someone you think is really a good supplier. How do you assess their quality control processes in order to make sure you're getting a quality product?
Yeah. So 2 things immediately come to mind. Sampling. You want to, we encourage to go slow in sampling. There's times in the product sourcing process where you can faster, but in sampling, you want to take the time and
Okay.
sample as much as you need to. Um, so especially if you're doing a custom product, you want to make sure you have a final sample that you have a high degree of confidence in so that you can then move forward and put in a purchase order and sleep well at night. Know that your product's going to come into the US or Europe, wherever, and you'll be able to sell it with few, if any, defects. So sample, it may take numerous iterations. We see, depending on the product complexity, anywhere from 2 iterations up to 6, 7, or even more if it's something like an electronics product. The other thing is consider investing in an audit. So something we do as a service, other sourcing agencies do as well. They can go to your factory on your behalf and they can put together a full audit. They'll look at the conditions of the factory. They'll look at their QA process in person. They'll have conversations with the production staff and management, and they'll get a very good sense of what type of factory you will be working with, and that will also increase your confidence as well. Um, and then the other thing you can look at again is by using something like Import Yeti, you can try to see if your factory has other brands that you consider to have good quality that they're exporting to. And it creates a good benchmark. So if you know that your brand is also manufacturing for your factory is also manufacturing for another major brand that has 4.8-star reviews on Amazon, then you're probably feeling pretty good about that factory too.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of research needs to go into it. And I think one of the things I take away from the statement that you just made is take your time when it comes to sampling. Everybody's
Mm,
so anxious to get started, but the truth is, if you don't get that quality right, it
right.
will show and reflect in the sales, the reviews, and everything like that. So you really do want to make sure you take your time in getting to the product instead of just getting it quickly to the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what kind of certifications and stuff should, let's say, you're doing it yourself and you can't really go over there. What kind of certifications would you say that most factories would be able to provide to you to give you a sense of, their capabilities?
Sure. So it often becomes fairly product specific for
Okay.
certifications. So, for example, there may be the FSC, and that's a certification kind of around environmental regulations. There could be ISO certifications around the kind of social certifications to make sure that you're working with a factory that has proper working conditions. And most of them do, by the way, in China. There's a common misconception that Chinese factories are like they were in the 1980s,
Mm.
and you have children working in very poor conditions. But Debbie, I've been to many factories that I've never seen anything like that, um, or nor has anyone on our
Yeah.
team in China. So we recommend for clients to drive compliance by what's needed in their home market. So they could work with an agency that specializes in compliance, figure out what certificates are needed for their baby product, for their grocery product, for their supplement, whatever it might be. And then with that in hand, so instead of relying on the factory, like going out there on a wild goose chase, like know what you need up front. It'll save you time, it'll save you hassle, and then you go with your wish list of certifications, compliance that you need, and you specifically ask factories, and you can quickly shortlist by doing
Mm.
that.
Good point there. Really, really good point. Now, when it comes to negotiating, like, let's say, pricing and payment terms and discovery schedules, what would you consider to be favorable for a seller?
Yeah. So the biggest thing about negotiations is it usually doesn't happen in a single sit-down session. Again, I think another misconception is that everybody gets into a boardroom and they're yelling at each other across the table, and then finally, at the end, everyone kind of just throws in the towel and says, "Okay." But it's normally a series of conversations. Um, we recommend to negotiate on every single purchase order you're putting in. And there's
Okay.
different things you can look at. Really, what you want to look at as a brand negotiating is where do you have leverage and what is your factory's position? So an example is factories are usually buying their raw materials, paying their staff and overhead in Chinese yuan, in RMB. But normally, brands are paying their factories in USD. So if the exchange rate shifts considerably to make one USD equate into far more RMB, then that's in the factory's favor. And then you could use that on your next PO, like knowing that if the exchange rate has increased 20% in the factory's favor since your last purchase order, then
Mm.
you go to the table with that. And maybe you don't ask for the full 40%, depending on your relationship. But I don't recommend to put the full squeeze on your factory. At the end of the day, it should be like a healthy relationship. But you could look at splitting the difference. So maybe 10% off your PO, they take 10% as well. And it's just doing that every time, like being aware of the different factors that go into pricing, what's important for your factory, and if they push back, you don't have to take that at face value. It's an opportunity to continue to ask other questions. So they say no, you can ask, oh, why is that? Like, for what reasons? And then they may say, oh, well, we can't lower the price because the raw materials have gone up for this segment of your product, and therefore it's costing us more. Like, we really can't. And
Yeah.
then that may create a troubleshooting between you and the factory where you think, okay, so maybe instead of this type of plastic, we could use a slightly cheaper plastic that would have the same effect. It would meet the same compliance standards, but it would bring the cost down. So I think that's something super important in negotiating. Ask questions, be willing to troubleshoot, and do it frequently.
Yeah, and like many things in e-com, it you don't go any place that you don't see an ad nowadays how you can, make $10,000 a month and do, with this product, or I've got the product that makes $100,000 and stuff like that. Sourcing, like anything in e-com, is not easy. It's
Right.
not. And so I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what China Product Pros actually does and your expertise. So if somebody's sitting out there and going, oh man, I don't want to deal with all of this, tell us
Right.
how you can help us.
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, what we do, we take the headache out of sourcing, and we help reduce costs, increase confidence, and save time. So if you're a brand that's just starting, or if you're a mature brand, we can go in and we can become an extension of your team. So we work something uh, quite unique in our space that um, really defines us is that we do not take commission. We are a zero commission agency. It means we do not build commission into a client's per unit cost at the factory, nor do we take commissions from the factory, which is common practice, by the way.
Yeah.
So this allows us to position ourselves 100% on the client side. We want the best price for you. We want whatever order quantity you want. And we want to build a relationship. I say like really the summit of an amazing Chinese factory relationship, Debbie, is maybe in year 2, year 3, you're in China with your factory, you're around a table, you're laughing and chatting about your family and about business, you're going to karaoke after, and you've built this relationship where like you have a very strong business basis with your factory, but it's also like a friendship that you can build on, and it's extremely. We've had clients that have been in their factory relationships for years now, and we love nothing more than seeing that factory relationship grow. And again, a big part of what we do is make sure you find the right partner so that you're able to do that from the start.
So then you might be in on the very concept with the people, finding out what their niche is and all of that type of stuff. And you're going to go and find those factories that kind of fit what it is. Because I'm assuming, since this is what you do, you have a good idea of different factories over in China that work on different types of product.
Absolutely, yeah. So we help. So normally clients come to us with an idea, and we can help them with that ideation. We can help forward their idea. Like we have clients that are literally come to us with a piece of paper and a sketch. Like, I want to make this. I don't know how to do it, and so we can take that. We have an industrial designer on our team, and we're able to forward that idea, make the CAD drawings, start the communications with factories, and then work into the prototyping phase. And we also have clients that will come to us and they have no idea what to sell. And in
Mm.
that case, we can help find product ideas either through a factory approach by seeing what's out there in our network, or we can use a data-based approach by looking through seeing what ideas are out there in the marketplace that are trending and that are profitable and likely to have that longevity aspect that's so important in
Oh,
and so
yeah.
fleeting sometimes in e-commerce.
Yeah, really. Sometimes it certainly is. But
Yeah.
so then, now once you've gone through and kind of have figured out the product and stuff like that, you're going to go directly to the factory. Are you going to be the person who has the relationship, or do you share that with the person who's actually doing the purchasing?
Yeah, I love this question. It's such an important one. And again, if you're out there and you're talking with an agent, make sure you ask them this question. In our case, Debbie, 100% we share the factory information. We make that introduction. We want the client to know who they're working with. We want the factory to know who the client is. Many
Oh,
agencies will not divulge that information
mm.
because of that commission-based arrangement. They don't want to lose their client. And so you may never know who your factory is if you're working with a commission-based agency. So it is a big part of what we do, that introduction, And we can help with communication as much or as little as our clients want. So we have some clients where we handle everything and we report back, we keep them appraised, and they may have some touch points with the factories, and that's what they like. They're like, we want you to take care of that. And we have other clients, for whatever reasons, they prefer to be more involved in the process, and that's okay too.
So you can help people with product hunting, you can help people with product sourcing. Really, you're going to tailor the experience for what, because some people are type A and want more control, and some people are like laissez-faire, I don't care, just take care of it. You can help
Yeah,
them no matter which type of personality they have. Is that correct?
that's exactly right. I mean, and we tailoring in a service-based business is so important, right? You need to ask those questions up front to find out what is important to the brand that you're talking to. And then you can try to create a solution that'll work best for them. And that's really what we try to do.
Well, what's your website?
Yeah. So we're at www.chinaproductpros.com.
With an S on the end,
Yep, that's
chinaproductpros.com.
right.
I really
Yep.
want to thank you, JK, today for talking to us, sharing just some good tips and knowledge about sourcing. I want to thank everyone for joining us today at Ecom Insider, sponsored by SPCTEK. Our guest speaker again was JK Beaton. And if you have any questions, please leave them below in the comment fields. Or if you enjoyed today's session, just give us a thumbs up or subscribe to some of our future editions of Ecom Insiders. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and especially thank you, JK.
Okay, thank you, Abby. Thank you, everyone.